home is lost. The sun was setting, turning the sky crimson, when Elias realized that he was lost. He had been walking through the forest for several hours, trying to find his way back to his car, but every turn of the path led him deeper into the dense thicket. Panic, cold and clammy, began to creep up on him, but he tried to push it away, concentrating on remaining calm. He was not an experienced woodsman, but his grandfather, an experienced hunter, once taught him how to navigate by the stars. Elias took out his phone, but there was no network icon on the screen. The battery was blinking, indicating that he had very little time left. Suddenly, among the trees, he noticed a flickering light. "Maybe this is a farm?" he whispered to himself, with hope in his heart. He quickened his pace, making his way with difficulty through the dense bush. The closer he came to the light, the more distinct the faint aroma of smoke became, mixed with something sweet and strange. Soon a small hut, built of rough-hewn logs, appeared in front of him. The light came from a small window in which a fire flickered like a beacon of hope. Elias felt a twist of panic in his stomach. He heard his heart beating in time with the silence of the forest. Suddenly, a creak was heard from the hut, as if a door had opened. The shadow, elongated in the rays of the setting sun, darted towards the forest, going deep into the shadows. Elias swallowed hard. He knew that someone lived in this hut. But who? Taking a deep breath, Elias knocked on the door. It creaked, opening into a small, cramped space. Inside, in the semi-darkness, a woman was sitting. Her face was hidden in the shadows, but her eyes, blacker than night, burned with a bright, almost unnatural fire. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice low and hoarse, like the whisper of the wind in the pine branches. Elias nodded, muttering, "Yes, I'm lost." "Come," and the woman made a gesture with her hand, inviting him inside. Elias hesitantly crossed the threshold. The hut was small and uncomfortable. In the corner, a fire crackled in the hearth, illuminating the dusty walls, decorated with strange patterns that seemed too complex and frightening to him. "You can stay the night," the woman said, her gaze never leaving his. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "Thank you," he said, feeling awkward under the gaze of the hostess. "My name is Christina," the woman said, her lips trembling barely noticeably. "What is your name?" "Elias," he answered, trying to ignore the strange feeling, as if he was trapped in a trap from which he could not escape. Christina nodded, inviting him to sit on a chair next to the fireplace. He felt awkward, as if he were under invisible gunfire. "Have you come from far away?" she asked, her voice soft and insidious, like the whisper of the wind before a storm. "Yes," Elias answered, trying not to meet her gaze. "I came from the city." "There are a lot of people in the city," Christina said, as if thinking out loud. "Yes," Elias nodded, not understanding what she was driving at. "There are many human souls," Christina continued, her eyes darkened, as if a new fire had been lit in them. Elias felt his heart beating faster. He noticed that there was a jug with something that looked like wine on the table. "This is," he began, but Christina interrupted him. "This is my tincture. It helps relieve anxiety," she said, her voice taking on an inviting softness. "Try." Elias hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should trust this woman, but fatigue and fear forced him to take a jug and pour himself some drink. He took a sip, feeling the liquid burn his throat. It tasted sweet and tart, with a bitter aftertaste. "She's strange," Elias muttered, trying to hide his anxiety. "She's special," Christina answered, her eyes sparkling like precious stones. Elias felt his body relax and his thoughts become confused. He felt a slight euphoria, as if his consciousness was floating, carried away into the abyss of sweet illusions. You're Beautiful, he said, his voice becoming hoarse, as if he couldn't speak. Christina smiled. Her smile was like a blooming flower, but in her eyes there was emptiness, cold and merciless, like a winter night. Thank you, she replied. Her voice was silky, but there was a hidden threat in it. Elias, losing control of his body and mind, began to look at Christina with growing admiration. Her beauty seemed unearthly to him. Her presence was mesmerizing. He could not take his eyes off her, as if he were chained to her by invisible chains. Christina stood up, walked over to him, and put her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was cold as ice, but pleasant, like a soothing balm. You're tired, she whispered, her voice quiet but commanding. Sleep. Elias, like a puppet in her hands, stood up and followed her. He felt awkward and weak, as if his body did not obey him. He did not resist, did not try to resist her will. Christina led him into a small room where there was a bed covered with rough woolen blankets. Sleep, she said, her voice quiet but full of power. Elias fell gently onto the bed, his body sticky with sweat and his mind foggy. He felt strange, as if his body was foreign and his thoughts belonged to someone else. Thank you, he muttered, his voice weak and indistinct. Christina grinned. Her smile was dark and sinister, like moonlight breaking through the dense crowns of trees. You're welcome, she replied, her voice quiet but full of threat. She left the room, closing the door behind her. Elias, lost in sleep, did not hear her return, did not feel her crouch next to him, her breathing becoming hot and rapid. She looked at him, her eyes burned with a fierce fire, reflecting the flame of the hearth. There was a strange combination of hatred and lust in her gaze, as if she was about to swallow him whole. I was waiting for you, Elias, she whispered, her voice sounding as cold as icy water in a winter stream. Elias did not move, did not wake up. He was captured by her will, like a fly in a spider's web. I need you, Christina continued, her voice becoming cold and threatening. She ran her hand over his face, her touch cold and unpleasant. Elias felt a slight pang of pain, as if he had been touched by an ice spike. You will become mine, Christina whispered, her eyes shining with an ominous gleam. She leaned towards him, her breath burning his face. Due to YouTube rules, this video was divided into 2 parts. You can watch the second part on my channel.